Well, Hanz and Madhu, thank you so much for coming on. We already started recording and then I went off on a tangent already, so we're off to a great start. But thank you both for coming on. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Yeah.
for having us.
So Hanz Kurdi and Madhu Chamarty. Hanz has 20 years of experience with Silicon Valley high-tech startups. He's held leadership roles in the areas of finance, client development, sales and operations, and corporate strategy. Hanz has been mentoring and advising companies across the globe, and within the last 4 years, he co-founded HKMC, an advisory firm focused on nurturing global entrepreneurial ecosystems. Hanz was an early employee at numerous startups with successful exits to Google, PayPal, and Vox Media. And when not immersed in his daytime work, Hanz speaks about the power of unlearning and finding new perspectives as a way to create harmony in the workplace and beyond. And he has written a poetry and prose book called Elevate: A Journey Within. He's created and facilitated executive and leadership training programs in North America, Europe, and Asia, while he was an adjunct instructor at UC Berkeley in the International Diploma Program. Hanz, really thankful that you're willing to come on the podcast today.
I need to rest after that. Wow.
Yeah, take a breath, Hanz.
Holy cow. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. Madhu, on the other hand, Madhu is a versatile leader with 18 years of strategy and operational experience. He's been part of 3 separate $250 million plus exits, and before HKMC, most recently founded and was CEO of BeyondHQ, which was recently acquired. Congratulations on that. A pioneering business-to-business HR tech startup, closing multi-million-dollar fundraise rounds and 6-figure deals with Fortune 500 companies. Madhu has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Axios, Fast Company, Business Insider, and Entrepreneur. Madhu, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's like to be here.
And together, you guys both run HKMC, an uncommon advisory firm working with entrepreneurs making their first big launch, businesses embarking on new chapters, and organizations seeking help traversing our new shared post-pandemic reality. The two have lived across 6 countries on 3 continents, have stories from 7 different companies, time at both Stanford and Berkeley, 5 successful acquisitions totaling $1 billion, have helped raise more than $180 million in capital, and have 15 years of partnership, mutual mentorship, and friendship together. Wow.
Loving that last statement. That really sums up why we continue doing what we're doing.
Somehow I put up with Hanz is the punchline.
See the difference? I'm the nice guy, clearly, and Madhu's always messy.
I love it.
I think that does it for our episode. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, phew, man. Glad I kept a straight face throughout that.
Yeah, you guys did great. Hanz and Madhu, can you guys talk a little bit about what were the conversations that led to starting HKMC together, and why are you in business together?
I'm going to let Madhu start, but I'm going to say one thing prior, if I may, which is there are the things that we can talk about, things that we can't. Because the things that we can't is usually Madhu in a headlock and me like screaming in his ear, like, come on, man, we got to do this. And him saying, maybe, maybe not. But I'll let Madhu tell the stories. So please go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So I always have found that Hanz had seen and continues to see things before they happen. So he's a bit of a futurist and fortune teller in my life. And this inception of HKMC is no different. He had been talking about joining forces in one form or another for years. We've, worked together, as you guys know, and we've advised companies together and advised individuals on their respective journeys. Hanz is a transformational person generally in life. So that's true for me in my life in a number of ways. And with HKMC, he had been talking about bringing our collective experience to bear in a more kind of formal joint effort for a while. And I had agreed with him in principle, but then had been on my own journey, particularly over the last sort of 5 years with BeyondHQ. And then as it was starting to be evident that the company is going to get acquired and I'm going to move on to what's next, he sort of heightened the fortune telling and said, look, now is the time. There's a lot of ecosystems globally that could use lessons and experiences from Silicon Valley. Let's do this. And after some initial sort of hesitation, mainly from my emotional exhaustion of wanting to take a break after 5 intense years, I said, yeah, let's actually look at what that means to foster innovation and support in global ecosystems. And so we started taking some conversations with companies outside of Silicon Valley, outside of the United States. And then it kind of a jolt of inspiration and excitement, right? It's almost like you drink, electrolytes after a hard workout. You're like, I need a break. I need to go home. I'm exhausted. Wait a minute. What's this thing I'm feeling? This feels pretty good, actually. Hold on a second. So that's how it started. And, in the past sort of month or two, we've really kind of ramped up and started committing to, exposing our efforts with HKMC more broadly to the world. So that's a little bit of the origin story. Is Hans always being ahead intellectually, and then waiting for me patiently, mostly patiently, to catch up with him.
That's great. A couple of those headlocks behind the scenes, sort of a deal. But.
That's right.
Yeah, Madhu's deep intelligence, I think, makes me think he's almost like a quantum computer where he can think different permutations of one thing. So it's like sometimes it's paralysis through analysis, but honestly, this wouldn't have worked without Madhu. It's like,
you wouldn't have had the MC.
Like a putt swing trying to get out. And I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, yeah, you forgot to flip this switch and this switch and this switch and do that. I'm like, oh my God, there we go. So, but it's us knowing each other for so many years that enabled us to get past so much of this kind of almost societal constraints of two individuals working together. There were so many startups fail, obviously, because it's just, bad team cohesion. And I think in the first 10 years of our lives, we got rid of that. By like arguing and fighting and wrestling and beating each other up and then like missing each other and like, oh man, I love you. Oh, I love you too. Oh, I'm so sorry. But the beautiful thing about Madhu, and he's one of the very few, I mean, outside my mom, I would have to say, he's probably the only one where I end up having such deep conversations. And even through conflict, there's always a moment of what did we learn here? What are some of the things that, that we just learned in this moment? And he walks through the difficult conversation with me. And he's like, gives great insight and says things like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think about that. Okay, that's a takeaway for me. I'm going to think about it. And then next time we talk, he thinks about it, comes back and says, I love that you said that. Thank you. And I'm like, yeah, I thought about this too. Thank you for saying. So we've had this evolutionary growth together. So, and as cliche as it is, we always say, people should live in cliches. It's beautiful. It's the moment that you commit to something is when things start changing. And we just committed to this relationship through everything that we've been through. And so, it wouldn't work without you.
What a cool picture of like healthy conflict. I feel like in our world, like conflict is usually goes badly. Like most people are not great at conflict, right? And like people take it personally, and there's emotions that get involved and egos get involved and all sorts of that. Like what a cool picture of conflict that you both can speak to and have lived out in your lives.
Yeah, well, thank you for characterizing it that way. And as you touched on it, Joel, it's a lot of egos, and ego is also one of the most misunderstood concepts in the world. Right. Ego is always portrayed as a negative thing, but, from a technical definition standpoint, ego is the sense of self. And it's a complete pie chart that has self-confidence, it has self-love, it has jealousy, it has greed, it has fear, it has self-protection. All of that makes up one sense of self, right? So truly, when you say getting rid of ego, it's not an easy task because ego makes us who we are for the most part to be in this conscious world. without getting into too much of a philosophical tangent at this point of the podcast anyway, I will say the healthy conflict is healthy because we oftentimes identify what component of our ego is coming into play when we have conflict. When Hanz and I have conflict, is it the mutual admiration? At which point, no problem. Yes, I will take her advice. Like, is it insecurity that is coming, that is resulting in the conflict? Is it self-preservation or protection? So identifying what drives conflict has been a huge key for us. And at times when I feel like, despite, let's say, me not liking Hans's delivery, if I see that he has a point,
Yes,
I'm
happens a
like,
lot.
absolutely right. You know what? I'm just gonna take it. You're so right. I'm angry with you that you're saying certain things to me, but I 100% agree with what you're saying. So I had to get better at that over time, and I enjoy it when I see the point, and I'm like, yes, I'm here. Everything you're saying is right, and I'm joyfully accepting the critique, right? And it takes years, at least
Yeah,
a
that
couple of
sense of
years,
health.
to get to that level of
Yeah.
personal awareness to have what you're referring to as healthy conflict.
Yeah,
I love the way.
I don't know how
I
often
just
I
want to work
joyfully
thing
accept
before
it.
we move on really quickly. Madhu, do you have the fan on next to you? Because there's a...
That's not me.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that there was, because it goes up and then it goes back down. And
Yeah, I see that. I'm hearing that too. Apologies. I don't know what it is.
Okay,
I
got
think
it.
it's me. I will look into other windows.
No, not at all. I just sometimes you have that fan below the desk.
Yeah. No, I don't.
That's why I asked. It's just because I know that. Okay, cool.
That's
Sorry,
okay, we'll
guys.
take it
I
out
didn't mean
post.
to hijack the conversation.
No, not a problem. I really like how you talked about that. I was getting rid of ego is such a difficult task, and I think often, in my experience, we can misunderstand that as saying like, okay, we're fighting, so we both have to just like take a full step back and tone down our personality too much. And what I'm hearing and you're talking about your relationship, and I can draw imagery in my relationship with Joel as well, is rather than both of us toning down our relationship or toning down our personality and becoming less than what we fully are, it's leaning into what we fully are and figuring out how to make these vibrant, beautiful, bold personalities work together. And so it's really cool to hear that, like the way you put that and talking about the self-awareness that it takes, listening to what part of me that I love, or maybe that I struggle with, but that is a beautiful part of me, is causing this conflict and this tension. And then having the solution not be, all right, let me just take that out, but how do I make this work into the equation?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the quotes that I love from Ram Dass is we're all walking each other home. So we're a bunch of messy people just running through life trying to do the best that we can. And, at work, we're dealing with tons of egos, and we're so quick to call it ego, but a person could have just had, a sick parent, a divorce, a really just bad day because they lost a client, or whatever the case is, whatever their association of value is in that day. Yeah. And, in the end of the day, that the level of patience and observation and zero projection and judgment and that experience allows you to just be in the moment with that person, because maybe all they need is a hug, even though I'm like yelling at Madhu because I'm on a rug and I'm talking to Madhu and I'm like usually aggressive when I'm working out, but it's not like, it's just so I can keep going. Otherwise, if I stop this level of intensity, I get tired really quickly. So, and then I call Madhu like, hey man, I'm really sorry for being so aggressive on the call. I didn't mean that. It's like, okay, we're solid. Like, you were doing your thing. But like I could tell, like Madhu was being kind to provide me a token of like forgiveness, because he's like, yeah, you were an asshole, but it's cool. And then I took that, I placed it on my heart, and it's as a reminder, right? And so these are the things that we do, that we have to do. Otherwise, the world will just keep getting to us, and we're not our best self for not just ourselves, but for those around us.
Yeah, and I will say, sort of extending this philosophy of self-awareness and recognition of ego and what component of ego is playing in what situation. Extending that concept is something we do at HKMC to, the entrepreneurial process or the company building process, right? Every customer we have, every initiative we pursue, it is run by humans. Sounds silly, but we oftentimes forget that there's individuals behind the work that's being done that are a beautiful mixture of, insecurity and joy and intelligence and rage and desire and empathy. So oftentimes Hans talks about this human first approach to everything we do. And in the context of HKMC, we talk about there's a whole bunch of strategy work we can help you with, a whole bunch of tactical support. And there's also an underlying empathy layer. Can we always present empathy when discussing go-to-market strategy? When we're discussing the insecurities that come from fundraising, when we discuss the challenging times when you're restructuring a business and running layoffs, there's a whole lot of constant reminder of empathy that needs to come into play. And our goal is, by empowering the human, in the form that we do to each other, by empowering them to recognize their ego, to recognize the insecurity that's driving these decisions of their own or their competitors or their customers, etc. So that human first approach, especially when you're talking to international companies or companies that are not, from the culture that we're used to in Silicon Valley, where socioeconomically different drivers are influencing entrepreneurship, right? If you're talking about Eastern Europe or, Southern Africa or Southeast Asia. So how do you ensure human first approach actually translates globally? So it's a pretty exciting, non-trivial pursuit as part of the advisory work that we do. And that just really drives us. And also we hope that will differentiate us in pursuing what we do, and that keeps people wanting to work with us because they notice that we're human first, of all else.
Yeah, you guys have a quote on your website that I really liked that says, "If change is a catalyst for progress, then empathy is the catalyst for change." And I think it's so easy to look at ourselves and to look at other people and just get frustrated with man, they just need to change this. They just need to fix this thing and see past the human to the problem. And that's not the way that healthy change happens. That's not the way that meaningful long-term change happens. And I really liked that quote.
That is 100% Madhu and his poetic wisdom. I mean, he let that come out. And funny enough, when we were putting the website together, he sends me the text. He's like, "What do you think of this?" And I literally paused and I kept reading it over and over and over and over again. It's like these moments when you read something and it almost activates every cell in your body. You read it, and then the person that sent it, and just it continues to light up. So I'm not surprised that you picked on that particular content. Yeah, I mean that's it's a testament to just the energy and effort that created HKMC, as well as the work that we really do. We really believe. So Madhu, kudos to that line.
Yeah, no, thank you. I honestly, the worst kept secret in my mind to coming up with things like that, honestly, is anytime we're trying to express ourselves, or when I'm trying to express something with Hans or vice versa, right? We try, I don't know if we do it consciously, but I've noticed that it's become a signature of our communication, which is we always attempt, and for the most part succeed, at being truly authentic with what we're trying to say. I genuinely believe that sentence. The connection between empathy and change, it actually makes sense to me from a kind of a math equation standpoint, right? If you don't have empathy, change is going to be difficult. Yes, understand that change is a catalyst for progress, but how is change actually going to happen? The one big enemy for change anywhere on the planet is one's ego. In the holistic definition of ego, that is what prevents you from changing, because your ego is built to maintain status quo.
Yeah.
So any friction to the ego is friction to change. So empathy, understanding what is your pie chart of ego, and being empathetic to it allows you to say, it's okay, loosen yourself up a little bit, you can go change. So that's where I feel if you truly dig in to what it is that you're trying to say, and then somehow, fortunately or fortuitously, have the right conditions to nurture your inner voice, because it's not easy to be truthful to yourself, right? A lot of courage is required because the world drives our opinion of ourselves more so than we drive our own opinion of ourselves. And sadly, that's a reality anywhere in the world. So if we have the patience, the fortitude, and the commitment to not only stay true to ourselves, but also have the courage to express our true self, then one can lead a really happy, healthy, wealthy, wise life. And it's just a lifelong pursuit for most people. And so I wanted to tie it to why is it that we were able to, at least I was able to think of that sentence, is because living your authentic life, finding what it is and being courageous enough to pursue it is the name of the game to a happy life, whatever that version is. And the courage part is so understated.
Yeah.
There's so much hustle porn out there that says you gotta do this and do that, and if you just work hard, success will come. But nobody talks about authentic
Mortifying, busy. Yeah.
being courageous to find it, and also recognizing that you are a complex individual and everybody's ego is a pie chart that needs to be acknowledged. Like that's the hard stuff, right? That doesn't sell, posters. That doesn't make it interesting on Instagram. But anyway, that's a backstory of how I think about sentences like that, or generally a signature of our communication.
And to add to that, and this is kind of how Madhu and I kind of live off of one another. So he'll say something like that, and then it makes me think about the change makers of this world, the people who really put energy and effort behind not just creation, but kind of that deep empathy and the deep connection. And one of my favorite movies is Dead Poet Society. And one of my favorite lines actually in that movie is medicine, law, business, engineering. These are all noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. So if that is how we approach business, I think we've changed the world, because it's not just about the hustle, to Madhu's point. It's not just about accomplishing a task. Care doesn't come from finding the right equation for that solution to advance a product a certain way. Sure, that sustains the business, but what sustains life is everything else, what Simon Sinek calls human skills as opposed to soft skills. So he doesn't like the term soft skills, and I agree with that. These are human skills, and we need to reinstitute human now more than ever. So.
Yeah, with Chat GPT and all this, all the push for AI, and I think so I work for an agency, right? Like a marketing agency. And I think there's the talk of oh, well, we're not going to need copywriters in a decade because we'll just have AI do it. It'll take care of it all. Right. And I think what that's missing is all the human element that if I could go on and on about that, but really that there is especially working with companies and working as an advising agency or working in really any sort of working with people role, making the human feel seen is the differentiator, is that's what sets you apart. That's what is the importance there.
Yeah, one night Madhu gave me homework to do, so of course I didn't do it. I ended up chatting with ChatGPT. The next day, I'm like, Madhu, seriously, I had this conversation with ChatGPT about this human machine thing, and I would send him the email of the conversation. And my point was, it almost felt like I was actually talking to someone, but it felt like this repetitive response to me was so obvious that it was a machine. But my point was why does there need to be? My question was, what does it mean to be human? That was my initial question. And then the funny thing is there was no direct answer. It was, well, with the advent of AI and the blah, 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 that answer had become, I'm like, why? Why has it become more difficult to answer that question? It should be very simple what a human is and what a machine is. And of course, with singularity and the coming together of man and machine and whatnot, and there's just some people get really excited about that. there's no question that technology has been a tremendous add-on to human life, to advance us. But that's what it is. It's an add-on. And we're going through this inflection point in humanity and redefining what human is. And now we're speaking to the concept of consciousness within machines and whatnot. But, overall and where we are right now, and this is so nascent. And, but I just personally, the way that I think, there's something very special to be human. And I don't necessarily think we're weighing that very much. And someone like Reid Hoffman, who wants to change the word artificial and artificial intelligence to bring on faster adoption of AI. And a recent article that came out about him talking about, why are people so afraid of AI? We should talk about all the value that it brings. And I think he's missing the point, because I don't necessarily think anyone is questioning that it adds value. But I just think the adoption and where that can go and how that can evolve, that's what really needs to be like. So I agree with him that this is adding tremendous value. Absolutely. But we just don't know. We just don't know where it is. And now Sam Altman coming out saying, okay, yeah, we really need to double check this, right? We really need to slow down and figure this out. And one of the companies that I worked at, my CEO, Tristan Harris, he's on the Social Dilemma on Netflix. It was so much fun working in that company, not necessarily because of the company itself, but having conversations with him during lunchtime.
Yeah,
that's forever. It was so on point. But he was asking questions, and that we're asking today about AI, but mostly about the noise of the internet. And it's like, well, how do we shut down all that crazy noise? Like, what does that really do? How does that affect us? But that's with the advent of Instagram, Facebook, and all and so people were too excited, and they're like, oh, come on, it's not a big deal. Oh, come on, it's not a big deal. And now we obviously know that it led to mental health issues.
right.
So it's the same question with AI. No one's questioning that this is going to add some tremendous value to life, but what is it going to take away? And I think it's important for us to pause and say, okay, these are the things that it could possibly affect, and let's talk about them.
Yeah, and I think we societally, not the four of us, but we we did a lot of things with social media.
What society? What are you talking about?
In the pie chart of society, we're a small slice. I think we rushed ahead with social media because it was exciting and because it was new and because it was fun. And I think there are things to learn from that about here. It's been around for what is Facebook founded in 2005 or something. So it's been around for 15, 20 years now. There is some context that we can look at what has this done? And I think it's important to learn from those things and not just to forge ahead and not to, again, AI is a value add, right? There is a lot of benefit that comes from that, but there also probably are negatives that we don't understand yet. And if we don't understand what the negatives are going to be, maybe we should be aware of them. So
it's that road to 100 million, right? Users. So when you look at the chart of the road to 100 million, and you look at from Airbnb to, from that type of site to a Facebook, a social media, Instagram, ChatGPT just went straight up. There was no timeline. Time didn't even really move. It was just a few months and then boom.
Yeah.
And so, so the adoption is great, clearly, because there's strong usage and this newness of it all. But you don't have enough time to understand the effect. And we should be intelligent enough to say, yeah, this is cool. Let's incorporate it in a way where we can absorb the shock. But people are just excited, and they just jump right in. Jumping into the fray and trying to figure it out later because they don't think it affects them.
Yeah. Man, one last quote that reminds me of is, so there's this new movie Oppenheimer that's coming out. It's Christopher Nolan's movie this summer. And
I can't wait.
I can't wait either. I'm really excited for it. I think it'll be a blast. But one of the quotes from the trailer is the guy playing Oppenheimer says, they won't fear it until they understand it, and they won't understand it until they've used it. Talking about the atomic bomb.
Yep.
And that this conversation reminds me of that. Not to get too dramatic about the future of AI, but
I'm actually, Joel, I'm very glad that you brought that up, because two reasons. One, I spent a lot of time in Santa Fe and Los Alamos in a prior role and saw all the houses where the atomic bomb research scientists lived when the bomb was being developed at the Trinity's test site. This was a few years ago, so
So surreal.
yeah, Einstein lived there, Oppenheimer, like a bunch of people that came and visited the site during the project and after. So I'm also a history of science nerd, so this entire rest of the conversation could be focused on that. I will hold off on it. What I wanted to say about what you just said, and also what Hans was saying about, let's talk about what it takes away any technology or AI. More broadly, that is a challenge facing humanity because the pace of change because of technology continues to be faster, not just in AI, right? In biodegradable materials, in pharmaceuticals, in pursuing space travel, in rapidly building new communities and ecosystems that were primarily, covered by forests, and so there's various aspects of life that continue to evolve because of technology-driven progress. And what we as humans have a terrible track record of is keeping up with understanding the impact of change. Because our human brains work at a certain pace. Beyond a certain pace, we are unable to retain information, right? Whether it's the number of relationships, like the Dunbar number, or it's the amount of information you can see on a screen. So if you present like frames per second in a movie beyond a certain speed, you can't tell the pace. That's why when a butterfly flaps its wings or a hummingbird flaps its wings, you just see a blur, because we cannot see we can't distinguish the number of times it's fluttering its wings or flapping its wings. So same thing applies with technology. Our ability to produce new technology and our ability to have that impact our lives fast exceeds our ability to understand the implication. And the way we're intertwined as a society globally, there is no singular global entity that is tasked with figuring out the impact of change, or there is no vested interest by the powers that be to actually take this on, right? There's no incentive, certainly, other than this very kind of fuzzy notion of danger to humanity. Other than that fuzzy notion, there is no impending danger, because we are like a frog in the boiling pot. Nobody feels like we're going to go away tomorrow, so nobody's going to care to do a concerted effort to try and understand the impact of technology. As a result, we will continue to invest, continue to bemoan the issue, but not really do anything about it until the powers that are progressing the technology actually take a step back and say, hold on, guys. So I predict is a predicament that we're going to live with for generations. And back to what your point is about the Oppenheimer quote, we will not fear it until we use it, right? Something has to happen, like we've seen with social media. Something will happen, which is going to be bias-driven AI decisions that has, catastrophic implications on property or life or just something which could be very silly, but it's a public failure, right?
Yeah. It's something like that needs to happen. It's the EGI from AI. So the EGI is the.
Anyway, I want to zoom out and say, like, the challenge with this idea is not just with AI. It's just a fundamental attribute of humanity. We are terrible as a species at understanding the impact of actions we produce. That's been the case.
Well, those are like the powers that be, right? Those are the powers that be definitely have that. So, I mean, I agree with you to a limited, the limit of where I agree with you is, yes, those who have the ability to make change are exactly fall into that category. But the rest of those who are not tend to not have a strong voice in that change. So it seems, and we're so quick to generalize with statements like, oh, it's just human nature. Or, my gosh, humans in general are just, but they're not, it's there are so many people that believe that we borrow this world from our kids. We don't give it to our kids. So everything that we do is their talent, not ours. But yet we live in a world where it seems the other way around, because mostly greed plays a big role, to your point, Madhu, with that, financial incentives and whatnot. If that's not there, then what? If you look today, there was in the United States Supreme Court did something to reverse, water protection that Biden did. So who gains from that? Well, clearly, oil companies, fracking companies, etc. They have a better chance of doing what they want to do because the laws and malware would do. So, but do they not care about water? I'm sure they do. But for them, they care about the pocketbook war, explaining what they're doing. So, again, I'm just using that as an example because, well, the rest of humanity cared about water more so than the pocketbooks of the big oil companies. But who wins? The big oil companies. And then we're stuck dealing.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess,
so
yeah.
that's the problem. It's like a subset group that basically has to push forward their own agenda, while the rest of us have to deal with it the way that we do. And I just wanted to go back to that AGI thing, where that's when artificial intelligence starts writing its own code.
Yeah.
So it becomes general intelligence. That's the 3 to 6 years coming, as Elon said. So within this decade, we're going to see a complete change by was it 2030? He said the world's going to look very vastly different. In what ways, who knows? But back in the day, this was maybe like 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, Google, it was Eric Schmidt said something to the extent of, and I don't want to be quoted here, but I honestly believe he said something along the lines of, this low-level AI is already operating in our world. And this was way before even a discussion of AI was a thing. So OpenAI was started, 7 years ago, 8 years ago? So double that.
Yep.
And that's when we've been poking, and trying to see, because it's all about, it was under the guise of automation, right?
Yep.
So how can we automate? And automation is beautiful, right? It helped us, speed up the work that we needed to do. And then we got into blitz scaling and whatnot, and speed. And it's like, okay. Mental health is an issue. How about we slow it down? Because we're starting to deal with that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many topics that we just touched on right now.
That's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Wide ranging, but interesting.
Yeah. I'm loving what I'm hearing. This is just so much wisdom, so much interesting things. But I want to kind of pivot off that last thing you said there about mental health, right? And kind of pull back to when I was reading your bios, right? And what Joel read at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, these people are impressive, right? They've done a ton of things. But as you said, mental health is a big deal. And so I want to ask, how do you balance being business owners, being executives, being in the hustle of Silicon Valley, and resting and caring for yourself and being successful, but also taking care of yourselves?
Lots of crying, lots of, need your man. It's just like any other human that should be able to feel comfortable in doing so, just to let go and to say, hey, you know what, this is too much for me right now. And then there's a fine line with doing that, where you're doing too much of that and really not going anywhere, and then just sulking in your vastness of pain and whatever it is, but also finding the right path to go down kind of a healing journey, right? Mm-hmm. And healing comes in so many different ways. The one thing, and prior to all of this, in my career, I've done this kind of life coaching on the side always. Always getting, I don't even like to call it life coaching. It's just, I'm just like the advice guy, and I don't necessarily take my own advice sometimes, because I don't know, right? And I tell people look, I'm going to say something. I don't necessarily know if this is right or wrong, but the one thing that I've noticed is people love the cycle of their own pain, and they sit in it a little longer than they need to. And not that they should, but then they need to, because they now have the necessary tools to be able to internalize, absorb, and then kind of elevate their experience of life. It's just what ends up happening is what people say, well, they're in this comfort zone. I don't necessarily believe in comfort zones. I believe in familiarity zones, because there's nothing comfortable about your pain, but people stay in it. So they're familiar with the zone that they're in, and it's safe. So they seek safety over comfort. So I think it's a misnomer. So in the end of the day, where they know what they need to do, they don't do it. Part of it is because they're not seeking the right help, and they're thinking that they have to do it by themselves, or they're too ashamed, which shame is it's worse than depression. Shame is really the bottom of the barrel experience that leads to a lot of self-harm. But it's like they have the shame of expressing themselves. So my first comment was cry, let it out, call your, brother and say, hey, I'm not feeling good. I need help. And that should be absolutely okay. And it is exhausting for the other person, but you shouldn't feel ashamed that, oh my God, I'm leaning too much into you. And if we do that more so than not, then we build a stronger tribe, and then we start realizing that it's not, the onus is just on one person to help, that we all come together in a very non-judgmental way to come experience that with them and let them know that, hey, you're not the only one doing this. And I want to say it was a tribe in Africa, but I remember reading about this, but it's when someone does something wrong within the tribe, they don't get punished. They are put in the center of the circle. The rest of the tribe is around them. And they just loft nothing but beautiful words towards this person. In essence, saying, you did this because we neglected you. And you clearly wanted more love. So we're going to provide you with more love. And it becomes this big kumbaya, big hug fest. Person usually cries, and then they get reincorporated within their tribe, knowing that, hey, we're all in this together. And so we need more of that, right? It's that to me is the biggest thing towards dealing with our mental health issue.
That comes back to empathy a lot.
For sure.
There's a lot of empathy in there, yeah.
It is the Babemba tribe in South Africa.
Thank you.
Right.
That's what it is. The Babemba tribe. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to, I guess, respond to that question, Jesse, with some more sort of facts that Hanz touched on, but I will be the example of some of the things he touched on. Your question was, how do you balance work with sort of self, right? Mm-hmm. And my experience has been that I did not. I get an F- for balance. If there's a grade less than F-, I would get that. I don't know, double F- or something. Like, stop grading me, because there is no grade low enough to grade how badly I balanced work and not work. So allow me to, what do you call it? Destroy the veneer of, oh, everything is in place. This guy has done good things and blah, 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 blah. Nope. Yes, sure. But that's one facet of my life. The other facet is sitting under my desk crying, or stopping my car on the Bay Bridge crying, the usual. So that has also happened. Point number one. Point number two, a lot of it goes back to this notion of balance, goes back to the nature-nurture combo, in my opinion, right? There's certain genetic traits we possess that influence how we balance ourselves. And then there's certain nurture implications, how we were raised as kids, how we internalized our formative years in college, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that I felt, and I share this in the hopes that people can relate to it and feel that hopefully they're not alone, because nobody's really alone. I always felt, for a combination of nature and nurture reasons, I felt like I am not adequate. As a result, I always have to keep delivering to the world, to my family, to my friends, to my perception of self. I am always just a little short, right? And so it's like a never-ending thing. Once you reach that, whatever perceived goal, perceived is the key word here, because until very recently, like in my 20s, 30s, etc., I never really consciously knew what I was aspiring for. I just knew that I was aspiring for something. Right. And there's a phrase I used to use called vending machines of happiness. And people have vending machines of happiness, right? You click a button and out comes happiness. And most of us, if not all of us, at one point or another, go to that vending machine. And for me, the vending machine not only was for happiness, it was also for validation. It was also for emotional comfort. And so for a long time, I never looked inward to get a sense of, I need to care for myself, or I am worth it. So since I didn't feel adequate, my only thing I knew how to do well is study X number of more hours and crank out more work. And that served me well in life. Like, I was the first guy in, the last guy out, and that got me good rewards and, admiration and adulation, which are all vending machine products, right? You go home and you're still like, So any little input that came toward me, that was critical, consciously or I should say voluntarily, or consciously or sort of involuntarily coming from outside world, would shatter my perception of self. Just complete destruction.
Just having a resentment of self. And that's one of the hardest things to even experience, because you're like, I need to love myself, but I can't to get past this. But I actually hate myself because of the things that I'm doing. It's just this vicious cycle.
And because you don't have, at least I certainly didn't have a framework for self-care and self-advocacy. And the nerdy engineer in me chooses to describe it that way, right? It is a tactical framework that we need to fall back on that makes us go, I need to take a break. I am worth taking a break. I am worth not saying yes to toxic environments. But many people don't realize, and especially if you've had the unfortunate situation of having seen examples of just condoning chaos, then your life is extra hard in achieving balance, because chaos is normal for you. Right? So
that's so important.
What combination of nature and nurture makes you who you are is first important, and then get to, why is balance even important? And then I will tie it back to Silicon Valley, consciously or not. This industry has, the tech industry, much like I think Wall Street, much like Hollywood, honestly, anywhere where high pressure, high ambition activity is rewarded, the ugly underbelly of it is the humanness of the individual is downplayed. You are a mechanism to produce incredible output. That is all you are. I'll ask you how your weekend was. Sure. How's it going? How's the weather? But deep down, sadly, even if we want to care, the system we operate in, for the most part, doesn't allow us to care. You only have 30 minutes with me. Sure, I would like to ask you, what is that book you're reading? But I just know that my boss is breathing down my neck and I just got to get to work. Right?
It's like an end quality experience. You're just out there.
It's an end quality experience. That's right. So tying it back to this human first idea, we always, to people that we meet in personal lives or professionally, I always encourage, and thanks to Hanz for educating me on the value of self. There were a lot of times when I felt like I'm not adequate, and he's like, dude, you don't understand, you're awesome. And I'm like, shut up, I disagree with you that I'm awesome, stop blowing smoke. And years later, sometimes the very attributes he would talk about as being valuable that he saw in me, I would start to see in you, sometimes years later, right? And I can say later multiple times because we've known each other since 2007, so they were making years later.
That's the value. It's reciprocated, and those conversations. You were speaking very like softly about this. I mean, we funny, and like F you, dude. No, you're amazing. What are you talking about? Let me go down the list of the things that you've just done this past week that aren't related to work, but they're related to how you made me feel. How at that point, your girlfriend at the point, or your parents, or how you helped your sister. It's like, the human connection is what brings us back. And this is why I love that quote from the Poet Society. Because as much as those are noble pursuits. What keeps us alive is the poetry. But to me, it's the poetry of learning action. It's, it's that art between two humans that really can bring us back to, seeing ourselves. And the other, it's always the other quote that I always say, I wish you can see yourself through my eyes, because then you'd see how beautiful you are. And it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. One last thing I wanted to say is,
please.
The moments of toughness for me, I would write on the mirror. I would say, Hanz, I love you. So every morning I'd wake up and I would read that when I was going through really tough times. So we don't always have someone there, but we have the best person that can help us, which is ourselves. But we have to believe ourselves and believe in ourselves. And even when I did it, and I would read that, oh, fuck off, that's bullshit. That's not, but I don't believe that. I would look at it again, and I would read it again, and I would read it, and I would read it, and I would almost force myself to just keep reading it. And walking away like, man, that was ridiculous. But in all honesty, I felt a little bit better on that side.
Yeah.
And it's like left leg, right leg, slowly went by attrition. It's all about that when it comes to self actualization. It's really important to just know that it's a lifelong process.
Yeah,
and as a personal trainer, I would tell people, look, it took you like 10 years to put on all this weight. Give yourself 5 years to lose it. Like, what do you need to lose it? Like, it takes time to get to where you want to get to. There's no magic pill. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I the win by attrition thing made me think of something, which is, repetition, or you want to wear down the negative things in your mind. There's a reason why they say practice self-care and not just believe in self-care. Right? You have to practice it. It's like going to the gym for your mind.
Right.
But another tactic that's helped, and I think it is a valuable tool, particularly in Western society where we are optimized for productivity as a society. In those societies, it is valuable to seek external counsel. Like therapy is, I am just a vigorous proponent of therapy, especially you live in a life where you're bound by demands on your productivity. And you have to work a hard job, you're in an ambitious role, or you're just trying to cope with, making ends meet, whatever it is. Seeking help externally in the form of a therapist or a counselor or anybody who can actually give you these frameworks customized for you, right? You already have these reasons as to why you are a certain way. You know your childhood, you know your teens, you know your young adulthood, you know your family, but it takes time and practice and a focused attention on needing to work on it. And for me, therapists
that's a
were
commitment.
it was really valuable to get deep in there, kind of like a fitness coach, right? Yeah, you could go work out, but you could be doing the lat pull down wrong for years. You're like, why are my lats crappy? Because you've been doing it wrong, bro. Like, it's just not how you do it. It's okay.
Right.
You can lift more weight, but you're just been busting your back in all the wrong ways.
Right.
Another thing this is another thought that I'll just kind of leave it out there on this topic, which is, I was watching something, I don't know, a clip by a woman who's Italian. I think Italian. She was just commenting on American society, where she says, only in America do you find almost every person has a therapist. Therapy is a product that you consume, just like fitness is a product. Healthy eating you have to go to great lengths to eat healthy in this country, right? It is neither cheap nor accessible. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because while I talk about sort of therapy and so on, the pursuit of balance is probably a very difficult thing in America compared to some other countries. Where they prioritize balance, not because of some brilliant genius thing. It's just their society evolved to have a lunch break. Their society, and in American sort of culture, we think of it as like, this guy slack off and they have 4 weeks of vacation. Maybe from one dimension, right? But what are we optimizing for? If we're optimizing for humans as assets or sources of productivity, absolutely. There's no better place to be than in America. But the flip side and the impact on humans, and Jesse, back to your question, is how do you balance man, if you don't focus on it, it looked like a stupid idea. What are you talking about mental health? Like, get back to work. You know, that's
Remember the intention absolutely would do, and the intention exactly needs to be there, but also this is not something that you want to stay in forever, that you know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's my point with, you also have to know that you don't want to fall into from one cycle to another, because in therapy, when you kind of let go of something and you heal something, let's say, well, then there's now this chasm, this openness. And if you don't sit and integrate your current self without any other influence, then you can evolve yourself to fill that space. But if you're so quick to go from point A to point B, then you're going to fill that chasm with something else that you're going to eventually need to get rid of that as well. And a lot of people fall into this forever therapy experience where I let go of my this, and now I'm going to, get into
your best friend, right? That's the problem.
And this is where when Madhu and I talked about a lot of this, when he was going through therapy, it's funny, his therapist wanted to keep him in, and he was like, hey, I think I'm good. I'm going to go integrate and deal with this. And he did. And then a year later, he went back, and the therapist was like, oh, wait, wow, that's amazing. And he was like, yeah. And it was almost like helping the therapist understand the true value of therapy and not just money-making experience. I mean, this therapy was good, but also any big therapist can also think that, oh, no, you still need a couple more sessions or whatever there is. But in all honesty, that's my point. We know ourselves more than anyone else.
Yep.
So Madhu's wisdom and intelligence about self, because he dedicated his life through that experience as much as I did, and that's why we come together with this open authenticity of helping each other, then it becomes a very easy, hey man, I went through this. Oh yeah, okay, cool. And then we talk about it. And if we need further assistance, we'll get further assistance, right? I mean, there's a lot to talk about. It made me realize there are a lot of bad personal trainers, bad therapists, bad attorneys, bad doctor, right? Because it's such a practice that finding a good one is really important. And, we are inducing ourselves with a tremendous amount of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that works pretty much mostly in the Western world. And that's why it evolved into therapists basically saying, well, find someone from your culture, a therapist from your culture, to help you understand the basis of what you're going through, because that cultural connection in therapy is really important. And it evolved into dialectical behavioral therapy, which is now evolving into a better approach where it's almost a Taoist approach of, if you don't have a problem, no, but I do. I feel you could feel that you have a problem, but you may not have a problem. Have you ever thought about that? And it's like this absolute need to solve for something that in your mind exists when in fact it may not exist. And so then you're just stuck in this cycle. And it's good to think of it that way sometimes, to basically say, hey, maybe I don't have a problem. Let me continue to pursue that as a possibility while seeking help and trying to figure it out. Right? So it's that deeper intention of self-actualization that makes you realize these things by yourself.
Yeah.
It's like we had 3 questions, and now we're like, having an hour-long conversation.
I know, it's great. There's a lot to think about what you both just talked about. There's a lot to think about and unpack there. I'm not going to pretend that I have processed all that yet. But I do have a couple of things that I want to say. One, I really appreciate you both sharing kind of your struggles with this, because something that Jesse and I have been talking about recently is that the personal is widely understood. That our individual experiences are things that we assume are something that Joel went through in the closet, something that Madhu went through crying under his desk, and that we assume that that's an individual experience that is applicable to myself and myself only. And in fact, those are the experiences that are widely understood, because we all have had those moments. Maybe I wasn't crying under the desk, but I was crying in the shower instead, right? Like maybe I wasn't like actually crying, but I was going for a run and processing through these things and just beating myself up and getting it out. Like those are the things that are widely understood, and those are the things that are widely relatable, even if they are deeply individual experiences. Sure. And we're all going to see them differently. So that's one thing that I wanted to say, and I just appreciate you both showing up fully on this podcast. That you don't have to, but you have, and I really appreciate that. The other thing on the note of therapy, one of the things that Jesse and I are really excited about for this summer for this podcast is we're bringing therapists on. And so we're having some of those conversations about, for people that are have heard a lot about therapy but have never done it, for people that maybe are in therapy but are not sure what's the point, how long should I be doing this, those sorts of questions. We're going to be having some of those conversations on the podcast. And we both are really excited about that. And so for anyone listening, subscribe, stay tuned, because those are coming up. But
Good pitch, Joel.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, this is, I feel like in everything that we do, and our human first approach at HKMC is, can we leave wherever we went better than we walked into it, right? And that's not to say this arrogant statement of, oh, well, it's messed up. But no. It's the positive psychology mentality where, like, things are good. Can we add something to enhance the good, right? It doesn't mean something is not good or broken. So that's always a good mentality. And with some of the conversations to bring it back to HKMC really quick, when we talk to people across the globe, one of my favorite moments, whether we're speaking to folks in the Middle East, South Africa, Eastern Europe, India, Singapore, Japan, it doesn't matter. We're doing the work, but we're seeing laughter. We're seeing connection. We're seeing joy. We're seeing people like bring their shoulders down and be like, wow, you guys really understand us and what's going on. And it's that human connection it's amazing when you put a little bit of effort into it. You see the reaction. And it was funny. We were talking to this venture capitalist who, came in with a little bit of ego that I know and you don't, blah, 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 blah. But, it's normal, right? It's their world, right? So you speak to people in their world. And at the end of the call, broke down, opened up, started laughing, started like, wow, this is, and then it just takes time. But if we stop with judgment, we lose the possible connections. And the idea here is, go beyond your internal filters and try to get rid of them. And just know that, again, we're walking each other home. And everyone has their own purpose in that moment for that thing. And if you continue to shine bright, people will eventually feel comfortable in that light and kind of break down their barriers, show you their true self, and you start developing deeper relationships. That's what matters.
That's
great.
So poetic. That's so beautiful. I just love that. I mean, just listening to people, connecting with people, seeing people beyond, like you said earlier, their productivity machines, their output, as it were, but seeing that, around the globe, everybody is human. And
very true. Very true. And Madhu, can I tell the not an entirety, but the Vegas story? Just the picture that I want to have to the world. Is that okay?
Sure. Yes.
So speaking of people who are high producers, so we were at a conference in Las Vegas at one point, many moons ago. We stayed up all night. We were out. We put the conference, and then get out to Vegas, and you're out there and you're having fun. And we got back at 7 a.m, and at 8 o'clock we have a call. I am completely out at this point. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So 7 o'clock, we get back to the hotel room, and we're just kind of like the dude's on his bed, I'm on my bed, and we're just talking, and I pass out, and then I have to go to the bathroom, so I get up, and then I notice Madhu, laptop in the middle, eyes closed because he's just passed, but the phone right here, and just typing, and he's having a conversation with a client, just killing it. I came and I'm still like dizzy, right? I'm just like, what are you doing? I'm just looking at it, and he's like, yeah, we'll definitely send the spreadsheets, absolutely. And I was at that point, I'm like, this guy's on another level of production, and I went back to I was supposed to be on this call. I was not on this call, so when the dude gets up at like 1 a.m, I'm like getting up at the same time. I'm like, what was going on with that call? And he's we're covered. We're good. We're solid. And I'm just, and this is why I'm in awe of this man who understands when he speaks to slowing down, who speaks to, finding ways to have tremendous intent in finding yourself through the chaos, and being able to know that we could get so addicted to the chaos that we're causing so many ripple effects.
Yeah.
It's a lot of wisdom to get to that, but it's a lot of intention and good people to walk that pathway. So it's always nice in the tribe to point that out, because it's sometimes it's such a journey that we take alone, even when we're around so many people. And sometimes we won't see that in ourselves until that's being, reciprocated one way or another through, here's a mirror, this is what you did. And initially in awe to, okay, that's awesome because we were young, but that's not sustainable. So how can we maintain that level of production with more joy in life and whatnot? And then, the Madhu becomes a maestro of his own life, and then being able to express that to others who are, he's going to be speaking at Stanford, and, these young entrepreneurs are going to be so excited and blah, blah, blah. He's like, let me tell you my story. And it's going to be directly relational to where they are in their life. So,
Yeah, it's funny how Hanz remembers that story. And I remember it's just, it was a sales deal, and because of that conversation, we closed the deal. And it's just, if only they knew the other on the other side of the phone and what state they were in. But I will say this, right, which is, speaking of sustainability, I did that exact same thing, by the way, in Zimbabwe, like 2 weeks ago, when I had to take calls in America. I was out, drinking with some people at the conference till 4:30 a.m. And I was like, oh, I have to get on the call at 5:30 a.m. But I did that for like 2 weeks, and don't ask me how I managed to do that. But
I know how you managed. You got back and I did talk to you for like 4 days while you recuperate.
That's right. That's true. What I wanted to say, right, is the thing that really profoundly affected my life, and I'm happy to have realized it before I'm on my deathbed, is everybody's worth it. Every human is worth their entire their entire pie chart is valid. Whatever your pie chart looks like, whether it's insecurity, whether it's ego, not ego, whether it's, good things or bad things that make up your ego, you're worth it. And it's okay to be on a journey to figure out the optimal combination. And it'll always change throughout. My advice to pretty much myself and everybody else on the planet is be okay with being a life in progress, and have the courage to be okay with it. And the rest of the world, the rest of life as it needs to unfold, will unfold in the most optimal manner if you pursue life this way, versus I need to fit into this person's description, that person's, whether it's therapy that's going to get you there, whether it's listening to words on this podcast, whether it's something else. Like, if there's nothing else people would remember me by, I would hope that they remember me by what I just said, which is have the courage and the forgiveness and self-care to treat your life as a work in progress, and it's okay, right? Self-care, faith, and forgiveness are the three words that I think of, large part thanks to Hanz for that language. But that's what I would like to leave people with, is everything else will follow, whether you're learning computer science, but you're writing a book, whether you're an insecure kid that's going to be the headline performer, like Tony Robbins, no idea. But if you can figure out what your pie is, while keeping in mind those three things, which is self-care, faith, and forgiveness, or self-advocacy, care, and forgiveness and faith, you'll live a wonderfully optimal life.
Yeah. Totally.
So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that serves as a valuable soundbite if it makes the cut and makes it into the video.
Yes, that's a valuable soundbite for sure, Madhu. Before we drop off, because we are at time and I want to be respectful of your schedules as well as our own, where can people find more of you if they would like to?
So I guess we would love for people to reach out to us if any of this resonated, ranging from what we do professionally at HKMC to who we are as individuals. You could find Hans and me both at hkmc.us, and we would love to receive any information. Hans and I both have, as like a narrative of our lives to date, Medium presence. So if you search for Hanz Kurdi and Madhu Chamarty on Medium, you'll see a lot of the philosophy we talked about over the years. Like, what was Madhu thinking in 2015? There's a Medium post about it, right? What was Hans thinking in 2020 during the pandemic? There's a post about it. So you can find us there. We're all on all social channels. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. Hans is on LinkedIn and Medium. And so, but HKMC is a great place to start because that's kind of front and center of our minds. So reach out for any component of what we talked about here, personal, professional, emotional. Who is the therapist that helped you change your life? How do you maintain such wonderfully luscious beard? All of those are fine.
I love it.
That's the important part right there.
love it.
Exactly.
That's great. That's great.
So even, by the way, it took me forever to tell Madhu that he looks better with a beard than without. And, you know, I'm now patient enough to know that I just have to wait, sometimes have to wait for Madhu to finally say, you know, man, you're right. You're absolutely right. This is good. It's just,
Well,
that
is true.
wisdom
That is true, but
to
I'm
flow.
50-50. You know, half of my family and friends are like, get rid of it. Half of my family is like, do not touch it. So I don't know what to do. Maybe next time we talk, it'll be like one half is shaved, one half
I
is
tell you what you do. You don't listen
Split
to
down the middle.
yeah.
don't listen to half of your family.
That's
Listen
right.
to- I'm not telling you which half though. Yeah, probably your
That's
half.
your.
Right.
Oh, I love it. Well, Hanz, Madhu, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. I definitely have learned a lot. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure our listeners will as well. And we'll be in touch about when it goes live and make sure that we've got all those links in the description also. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, you guys.
For the
You guys have been
opportunity.
amazing, awesome. Thank you for this platform. I'm really excited to hear what else is coming up from you guys. Joel, we've known each other for a while. I love you, big man. So thank you so much for you being you. And
Likewise,
I got
Hanz.
to Jesse this time around. And just keep doing what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, absolute pleasure. Such a profound thank you both for all your wisdom, vulnerability, and just taking an hour and a half.
That's it. It's been a
of your
pleasure.
busy
Thank
day
you for the
to talk to
words.
us.
And
Anytime, always.
It means the world. Yeah.